So in the last section, we set up our VPC and subnets. In this section, we'll set up our ec2 instance and log into it using SSH. So first, let's go over what an ec2 is. I would say aside from VPCs, the ec2 instance is probably one of the most important parts of AWS. It's essentially the backbone of AWS cloud computing. It is the computing in cloud computing. It is a computer basically. However, it's not a physical computer, it's a virtual computer, but it has everything your computer at home does, such as CPU, RAM, hard drive, and everything else your computer at home does. So this ec2 instance is what will actually be used as a web server. So before cloud computing, you'd actually have a physical server to handle your website or web app. But here with AWS, this ec2 instance is what will actually be our web server. And a web server without an operating system is pretty useless, so we'll be using the Amazon Linux AMI2 as the operating system. And obviously this is a Linux-based system. It's very, very similar to other Linux systems such as Ubuntu and Red Hat. And this version of Linux, the Amazon AMI2, it gives us a lot of functionalities out of the box, and we can take advantage of those and significantly simplify our web server setup. Not to say that other Linux operating systems or even Microsoft operating systems aren't bad. It's just since this is the AWS tutorial, I thought it fitting using the actual Amazon AMI as the operating system. And of course, if you use a Microsoft Windows server, you do get a GUI, a graphical user interface. So if you prefer working with a graphical user interface as opposed to the command line, it's worth checking out the Microsoft Windows server. And now we can discuss SSH. So SSH means secure shell login, and SSH is essentially how we log into our Linux EC2 server from our home computer. Because if you think about it, how else would we do it? We deploy an EC2 server, which is essentially a computer, to AWS in their VPC. So how would we access it? Do we go to the AWS warehouse where our virtual server is and then log in through there? And obviously the answer is no. So we log in from our home computer using secure shell login. And there's a couple of different ways you can use SSH. So the first one is PuTTY, which a lot of Windows users will be familiar with. I personally don't like PuTTY. I prefer Git Bash instead. There's nothing wrong with PuTTY, especially if you prefer a GUI, a graphical user interface. But I find it simpler just to work with Git Bash. You don't need to configure Git Bash to use SSH. You can just use one command and it will work right out of the box. With PuTTY, you actually do have to configure it a little bit. And I don't mind the command line, so I prefer using Git Bash, and I will be using it for these tutorials. But if you prefer PuTTY or having a GUI, definitely check out the PuTTY website. I'll link to it in the resources section. So with that out of the way, we can now actually set up our EC2 instance on AWS. So I'm here on the homepage of the AWS console, and we can go to the EC2 dashboard under services. And here we can just click on the launch instance button. So our very first option is the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. So go ahead and just select that one. And we want to stay in the free tier, so let's click on the t2.micro, and it should say free tier eligible. So next we can do the configure instance details. And we want one under number of instances. So we can purchasing option, it's free tier, so we don't need to worry about that. Network is going to be our VPC3. Our subnet is going to be our React Full Stack public one, because remember, this EC2 instance is our web server. We want it to be accessible over the internet. So our subnet is going to be the React Full Stack public one. And then auto assign public IP, we can just do enable. And everything else we can leave default. And this storage volume, we can also leave default as well. And it's not really necessary for us to add any tags right now, so you can also leave this blank. For the security group, we actually do want to use our security group that we set up in the last section. And remember, that was the React Full Stack Web SG, the web server security group. And we can do review and launch. And it does say up top, it gives us a warning, improve your instances security, your security group React Full Stack Web SG is open to the world. And remember, I did this because I left SSH to all IP addresses, and you want to change that in your app to your IP address. I just didn't want to put my IP address for privacy reasons. But in your app that you're building along with this, make sure you put your IP address for the SSH under the security group. And when we hit launch, we see this pop up for a key pair. We want to choose create a new key pair. And we can call this whatever, key pair 2 or 3. It doesn't matter. And then just go ahead and hit download key pair. And that's it. We can now launch our instance. If you did everything correctly, you should be seeing this page. And great, we see that our ec2 instance is running now. And it seems our security groups and subnet ID are the proper ones. So let's try logging into this ec2 instance. So go ahead and open up the terminal window. And then to SSH from git bash, we do SSH-I, and then the path to our key pair 8. And again, just to simplify things, I'm not hiding my key pair in anything. I'm leaving it under my downloads folder. But again, if you want to put this somewhere safe in your home computer, because again, you cannot download this key pair again. So if you lose it, you're kind of out of luck. But again, just to simplify things, I'll just leave it here for now and try logging into our ec2 instance using SSH. And also, I know it's a little hard to see, but there is really no way for me to zoom into this terminal window. I will include all of the terminal commands and a brief explanation of each in an article that you can easily reference. So I know it's hard to see these commands that I'm typing into terminal, but I can't really zoom in or anything. But like I said, I'll leave all the commands, every single command I do, in a written article in this module. So just reference back to it if you can't really see the terminal commands here. So back to our SSH. So it's going to be SSH-I and then the key pair. Because I'm in the downloads folder, it's just keypair8.pm for me. And then we need to log in as a user. For AWS, it's going to be ec2 user @ So this is how you SSH. You have to specify user first and then @ and then it's going to be the IPv4 public IP address. And you can see it on my screen on the bottom right hand side. So this is the IP address you put after ec2 user @. And then we can go ahead and click enter. And that's it. We're now logged into our ec2 instance. It was really that easy. And you can now see why I prefer git bash over putty. We didn't have to do any configuration at all. We can just directly SSH into our ec2 instance. And here in our ec2 instance, we can explore this a little bit. So we'll do cd/, and cd is change directory, / means home. So we'll do cd/, meaning change directory to the home route. Next command we can run is ls, and this lists all of our files and folders here in our Amazon Linux AMI. And exploring all of these is way beyond the scope of this course. There's so much here. For example, let's do cd/bin, and then if you do ls, and again ls lists all of the files and folders, you can see just how many files and folders there really is. And this is just one /bin directory. There's so many more folders in files that we would be here all week. So I'm just going to skip that part. If you are curious, just go ahead and you can explore it on your own. It is pretty fascinating stuff. And then you also have sudo nano, and nano is actually the text editor for this Linux ec2 instance. So the same way you have Atom, Sublime, VS Code, and other text editors, you have a text editor on the Linux AMI as well, and the specific one is called Nano. Any file in this Amazon Linux operating system, you can actually configure with sudo nano. So just go ahead and run sudo nano and then the name of the file that you want to edit, and you can actually edit the code in this operating system, which is pretty cool. And you can also delete directories as well. So you can do sudo rm and then the name of the directory. And then you have the pwd command, which stands for present working directory. And if we click enter, we see /bin because, again, remember, we cd'd, we changed directory into this folder. So this is where we're at right now. This is the present directory. And this is it. Feel free to explore this Linux operating system. It's pretty cool. But we're done for now. We'll continue building this app in the next section.